What are we going to call it? The Winestro Pod? Winestronaut Podcast? The Satellite Wine Club Spectacular?
I think some play on wine and podcast.
Hi, I'm Drew Cuddy. I'm the owner of Satellite in Santa Barbara, and this is our podcast where we talk to winemakers about what they're doing, usually under the umbrella of our wine club, and sometimes not. But we're here to talk about wine and kind of explore the adventure that natural winemaking is, and what it is for so many different people, and putting that into context for what it is for us. So we're here to share wine with you.
Sean Magruder. I'm a wine writer, former employee at Satellite. I'm just really stoked to be in Santa Barbara with this wine scene. Lots of young winemakers doing new things, and we're just hoping to really shine a spotlight on that. So follow us along.
So I guess this is the first podcast, and I'm so excited.
All right.
Or whatever this is. This podcast, it's a video blog, a vlog.
Yeah.
But anyhow, we're super stoked to have Gretchen Voelcker on the show today.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah.
And Sean, we will magically in post introduce ourselves with an intro at some point.
Yeah. We'll work on that.
I hope we have a
Magical
catchy little
laptop boys
tune
may be
and
in charge
such.
of that. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
But so Gretchen Voelcker, Luna Hart Wines,
Yeah.
in the wine club this month, showing off Syrah.
Yes.
So I think what we should do is probably start drinking it.
Perfect.
Good.
Without further ado.
Excellent. So I'm going to pour, I think this should be our method. We'll just pour in a glass for each of us, and then we can put the other wine in a glass just to share a little smell. Oh, I spilled on the walnut.
That's all right.
Walnut.
Good luck. Good luck for the first one.
Can you chuck us a towel?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, laptop boy.
Oh, wait, this one's yours.
So, yeah. Keep this one here. So what is this wine, by the way?
So this is 2021 Luna Hart Syrah from Heinrich's Vineyard in Ballard Canyon. And so I'm super lucky to get to have both my winery and this incredible vineyard that I work with in Ballard Canyon, and get to work with both ends of the spectrum. This is my this past year, fifth. This release is the fourth release of the wine. And I'm so pumped about it. I think that it's really kind of taken me a little bit of time to get into the groove with this vineyard and step into the wine I truly want to make with this property. But so this little spot is 5 acres of pure sand soil on the south end of Ballard Canyon, tucked down into the valley of if you're thinking of Ballard Canyon, the north end has a lot of higher elevation, the south end, a lot more valley topography, and this is tucked down into that valley. And it was planted in 1999, so quite established vines, and Geneva double curtain. So for those of you that don't know, It is more or less like table grapes, where you have the cordon, the woody part way up high, and all the greenery canes cascade down. And so you have this protection, not just from the valley itself, but also from the way that the vines are growing. And between all of that and the sandy soil, I just think this vineyard truly has such a thumbprint, specific character that I just fell in love with the first time I tasted the fruit.
I hadn't realized about the Geneva double curtain. I think older vineyards in Santa Barbara definitely there's a lot like that.
Yeah.
Last month we had a Merlot from a vineyard that's just right off the. Do you remember where exactly the Merlot vineyard
couldn't
is?
find that, but-
So 60s random old
Yeah.
site that's just Geneva double curtain thick from the bottom to the top.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a I guess a nutrient highway, super highway, but
Totally.
yeah, I guess because it's all sandy, it's probably a kind of desirable Like big, sturdy, hardy.
Yeah, and I mean, it truly is. We always play Welcome to the Jungle. We pick this fruit because it truly has this Syrah jungle feel. Syrah has those kicker canes that are just keep going for miles. So they have just the craziest canopy. And the owner planted it all. And I think it was just like that old school farmer mentality. He's not a winemaker, and he was one of the first few in Ballard Canyon to plant his vines, and got hooked on that.
Who was the first in Ballard Canyon?
It was Rusak, but it was not called Rusak. I think it was called Ballard Canyon Vineyard, and that was planted in the 70s. Cool. Yeah. So I love Ballard Canyon, especially the Syrah. I mean, we are the most westerly region outside the Santa Rita Hills. So we are warm climate, but we teeter on the edge of cool climate. And to me, that is what makes the Syrah so unique, that we can show the heat and the warmth of it, but also all of the finesse and layers that come from both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah. And that's such a good point too, because, you know, in Santa Barbara, we talk so much about Pinot and Chard in Santa Rita Hills, but, you know, Syrah, it turns out, is the only AVA in America dedicated to Syrah.
I just learned that.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, we think about,
Ballard?
Ballard Canyon.
Really? The only one.
Let's go.
You might think of
That's
Santa
so
Cruz
cool.
Mountains or Sonoma with Pax or Washington, but it's Ballard Canyon that's established that, and for good reason.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Definitely.
Gretchen, when you say other ends of the spectrum, going back just a moment, do you mean that normally you're working on the northern side of Ballard Canyon?
Yeah. So my other project, Piazza Family Wines, is where my winery is. And so I make both projects there. And so we're the north end of the valley, so a lot more sun and wind exposure, which totally just brings a total different characteristic to the wines. But also just looking at other producers in Ballard Canyon, most producers are making really big, bold wines. And I really aim to show a little bit more of a finesse to them, for lack of a better word. Yeah. And so I really love, there's always like a savory quality to this vineyard, like the olive tapenade, kind of Northern Rhône notes, as well as such an cool array of pepper notes. And
it's some sort of like Brazil pepper tree.
Yeah, totally. Cambodian
right?
peppercorns.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. Do you find, like, when you're looking, like, shopping for Syrah for yourself, are you leaning more to a producer or a region, or like inside France, outside France?
Yeah, I love Northern Rhône, for sure. I definitely love more savory qualities to a Syrah. I really had a hard time getting into Syrah at the beginning because I felt so many of them were, especially when I first started in 2012, very jammy characteristics of the wine. And it took a while to find the right inspiration that was really showing more of the layers to the wine itself. Right. And it's fun to see that a lot of producers are now heading that direction here as well, which I find refreshing because, in my opinion, the typical Syrah, and especially this is for people outside of our bubble, right? People that taste Syrah that live in the rest of the country, they taste the biggest and the boldest. That's the only thing that the menu is going to have.
Starting at 14.5%.
Exactly.
As a minimum.
Exactly. And to me, those wines feel smashed into the glass. It's like all jam and no layer. And
you want to throw a little sparkling water in to kind of
exactly. Elevate it.
To let loose those more delicate tertiary flavors.
Totally. And Syrah really has so much depth to it if given the chance to showcase it.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that leads me to something too, which is going back to the both sides of Ballard Canyon operation you've got. What do you see, climactically in the soil that really makes those two distinct from one another?
Yeah, so this year was especially fun. In general, it's always fun for me. We don't really tend to release the wines at the same time just because of inventory. But our estate, Piazza, was planted in 2001, and these vines were 1999, and both are Estrella clone Syrah. So they're the same clone, almost the same age. But but as I mentioned, Piazza has a ton of sunshine. We're higher elevation, about 1,100 feet, and a lot of wind exposure, but also pure limestone soil.
Yeah.
So that's a big player as well.
Like everything.
Everything.
It should
Everything
be,
changes.
it should be mentioned too. There's very little of that out here, so
Exactly.
that alone is very special.
Yeah.
They can't be more than like a kilometer or two.
No.
Like,
super
completely
close,
different.
5 to 7 minute drive. And really, we can see that all change. So Piazza is this little pocket of limestone. All of our neighboring vineyards are a little bit of mixed riverbed. Even Stolpman beneath us is a tiny block. One of their or two of their blocks have a little bit of limestone, and then it switches to riverbed.
Like it's really deep.
Yeah. And then Honada is sandy soil. So that's, we see that on the other side. But then outside of Honada, it's mostly pretty dense clay in South Ballard Canyon, except for this little tiny pocket of beach sand. And Heinrichs is tucked in between the old Jurien Hill, which it has a new name now, and I can't remember what it is, and Kimsey, neither of which really have much sand. So again, it really shows the nuance of Ballard Canyon.
Yeah.
That we only have 500 acres of vines in the entire AVA. But so much diversity within such a small space.
I had no clue till just now.
Yeah.
I think of it as limestone and of course, chemise and things like that, but I had no clue until just now.
Yeah.
Is it just planted to Syrah there? Or is there?
Heinrichs is all Syrah.
Awesome.
All Syrah.
Way cool.
And so also, I'm starting to talk about how this year was such an interesting snapshot of how these two different vineyards play. With all the heat that we had at the top of the hill this summer, still getting cool nights. So I was really bracing myself for a harvest like 2020 where we'd have this super ripe fruit and no acid. And luckily we were still getting our cold nights. And
we're getting shamooms with like 105 degree wind and
totally.
like 2 a.m. Yeah. That's a nice thing for acidity.
Yeah.
Avoid.
So typically on the estate, we begin picking Syrah middle of September, and we finish up picking with Graciano and Nebbiolo close to end of October. Right. This year, everything was picked or scheduled to be picked by Labor Day. So
that is for this 2021 vintage?
No, for this year.
2022
yes.
Okay.
And then 2021 to me was my dream winemaking year because I aim to make lower alcohol, higher acid wines. And every vineyard that I worked with, really, I was able to truly find the flavor depth to make the wines that I want to make.
Enough time for ripening to happen, so you get the full thing, but not like lighting a fire under every vine.
Exactly.
To,
like are we going to mix and miss it? But I think, and then again, to touch back on this year, and last year as well, this vineyard, because of how much protection it has, it can be very difficult just with, we get mildew pressure there and the bees start to hammer it. And so there always gets to a point where I'm like, this fruit is not going to ripen anymore. Like if
these
we wait,
plants are going to say no.
They're done. And it's usually pretty low. It's usually around 21 bricks. And that all the other buyers are terrified of that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm ready. Let's do it.
Yeah, sure.
And so this vineyard has really kind of forced me into having confidence in making the wines I want to make, because you don't really have another choice unless you want to let the fruit degrade.
Yeah.
Right.
And so like in terms of winemaking too, so you went in, you harvested this, you said late September?
This guy would have been, this is always my last pick of the year.
Okay.
So I picked this, I should have looked today, but it would have been mid to late October for sure.
Cool. It's 13.5% alcohol.
Yeah.
And it's got like incredibly fresh fruited acidity. Like
Yeah.
It feels like you like really get this like fresh blackberry, fresh blueberry, like
mulberry
quality of like
Totally.
acidity and fruit to it. And then it's like hits you with like all of these like layers of like, there's a palette of like a dust of like kind of like sandy, dusty kind of like feeling to it. Like,
Yeah.
to set you in the place. And then you get all of these layers of spice, like sage and like marjoram and like, I don't know, there's this real tiny sort of like, I don't know. Like
especially on the finish.
rosemary.
Yeah.
Totally.
And a little bit of that savory meat, like sanguine, irony,
Oh, yeah.
salty
Jerky
meat.
and,
Yeah,
like,
totally.
all of that. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see like how the fruit becomes more like cured meaty with fresh fruit, and then kind of all of that moves forward over time. Like this wine with the structure. Did you ferment? Did you destem everything?
So I
what's the
love making Syrah.
Yeah.
It's my favorite.
I want your process because you're good at it.
Yeah, we feel that from drinking this.
So I have a few tricks up my sleeve that I've learned over time. And I do a little bit of destemmed fruit. We do a decent amount whole cluster. And then we do a certain percentage of dried stems. So I collect the stems as we destem it. And then I lay them out in the sun and let them lignify and turn to woody stems in the sun. And then I add them back to fermentation.
Do you do like a layered, like lasagna approach?
So with
or
that,
is this more of a like...
I add them in. It's always like an estimation.
Bathtub.
People are like, what percentage is the dried stem? I'm like, well, I did like a 10-gallon bucket of dried stems in there.
Right, yeah.
You know? But I'm a big fan of foot stomping. So I put them in there and then mix them up a lot with my feet. And I really find that element of the dried stems in Syrah in particular adds this quality to the wines that makes it seem like they've been aged for a year longer than they have. And like this extra layer of complex mature tannin.
It's got this like, it kind of brings like, it's a firmer tannin than maybe it would have been otherwise.
Yeah.
It sort of puts like a bookend on the whole, I don't know, experience of like,
Yeah.
eat in the mouth, right?
Yeah.
It feels a little bit more anchored.
Yeah.
Little
totally.
gusto from the lignification.
Does it?
Yeah.
Do you find your acidity gets pulled out with that?
I mean, with
or-
the whole cluster for sure. I
the
don't
dried
notice
stems
a
less so?
whole lot with the dried stems.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've experimented with that with Grenache and Mourvedre. Did not really see any uptick with that. But this year we did some with the Graciano, which I'm excited to see because I think,
the Graciano is good.
yeah.
Like people should be buying the Piazza Graciano. It's really good.
Yeah. And so I but my opinion of Graciano, and I make most of it carbonic because I find that it lacks mid palate on its own. And so my thought was, oh, well, maybe the dried stems could be that layer that accentuates the mid palate.
Well, I can't wait to try it.
So yeah, but yeah, and I just actually did a little dinner at home, and I was a little nervous to showcase this wine to my family because maybe they like a little bit riper wines and this and that, and I'm so proud of this, and they loved it just as much. But I made filet mignon crostini with homemade aioli and caramelized onions, and it truly was a match made in heaven.
Yeah.
I'm ready for round 2.
Yeah. We'll come by. We'll see the waterfalls and all that.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested in the filet mignon on a cracker. Should we try the other wine?
Yeah,
and cut the
let's do
context
it.
of it.
Sure.
See what happens. So I'm gonna actually be. I should send this to you, laptop boy.
Yeah.
To read us the facts. I'm gonna do that. I'm
you
gonna
mind
forward
sharing
you
your
this
glass
so
with
that
me?
you can
Not at
read
all.
them, and we're gonna edit this out. So it's from Ted Talley. So this is this wine's imported by Terra Firma, which is a really cool little. They used to be the Rosenthal Wine Company of California. Like they held the whole Rosenthal book, and then Rosenthal decided to start distributing themselves in California. So the Talley family, who owned the rights for California, just brought in the most amazing import book that like happened out of nowhere. And so I've been really diving in with a couple things. They've made a few wine clubs, and like they're pulling really interesting small producers.
Yeah.
Like this is not even technically Saint Joseph, but it's fully in the AVA. It's just a young vineyard. It's 2016, and
Cool.
she is from Ardèche, and I don't think cares about the AVA
Yeah.
or the appellation. So
Just want to make the wine.
yeah,
It's awesome, and awesome to showcase these wines together. They're a good match, I think.
It's really, really cool. So she, I think, is more, in her 40s and doing some, really, really cool stuff. But here's what I have for the notes. I'm not going to pass them to you, laptop boy. Thank you. So planted in 2016 in Saint Joseph. She does not want to deal with the appellation. 2019 was the first vintage. We have the 21 here. Is that right? 21.
Nice.
Perfect. And what's cool about this, it's like going to set it apart, like really just like texturally, is that it's 2/3 in amphora.
Ah, love that.
Yeah, and then 1/3 is old barrel. It was bottled in April, and it's funny, they're both the importer and the wine rep are like, you got any more information? I was like, no, I don't.
I mean, that's more than I thought you were gonna have, to be honest.
That's not bad.
So she is young from the Ardèche and kind of like creating this whole winery just by the sweat and the dirt on her brow, and
Right.
yeah, really fun. So
I feel like right off the bat, this speaks to just a difference in climate between the two wines. Like you get that sunshine, although there's the complexity with your Syrah, especially Gretchen. But with this one, there's a nice French, cool kind of
talk about
greeny rockiness to it.
So we're talking about Gretchen's at 13.5, and like for our region here, like that's really low in alcohol.
Yeah.
She's labeling this at 11%.
Yeah.
Which is probably higher than 11%, but maybe not.
It has a lot of depth to it for 11%, which again is like the misnomer, right?
Yeah, younger grapes
right.
too, and like it's just kind of like, I think it's kind of a fun like tighter, leaner approach, and then the amphora kind of adds like a weird complexity to it. I love that it has similar olive tapenade vibe, but this to me is so much more black olive tapenade, like almost sun-dried black olives. Totally.
Whereas this one is a little more greener olive texture to it.
I get a little bit more reduction on it too, I feel like.
Sure.
Yeah.
How do you deal with the reduction with like, do you have problems with
so much problems with it?
Syrah is like reduction prone, right?
There's a few of these barrels that I think we pumped over for 2.5 hours a few times each. And I'm like, I hope it's okay.
Yeah. Well, I guess like maybe we should say why you would do that. Like why expose, why pump over the wine to expose it to so much oxygen?
So in my experience, Syrah is reductive from day one when you bring it into the cellar.
Reduction being a euphemism for sulfur smell in the wine.
Yeah, but then it becomes it starts off as being maybe a little bit of an eggy, sulfury smell, but then it evolves to be a lot more of a intense flinty characteristic, and a touch of that. I love it. It's really nice. Or mocha can also come across as a mocha note. But when it's gone too far, it's like, oh my gosh, did somebody light a match in this glass? And it can be intense.
Yeah. Oh, look, there's a blue angel in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yowzers.
And so I, with Syrah in general, I really think of myself as an intuitional winemaker, and when people ask, what does that mean, and what does that mean compared to how most wine is made? And just recently it popped into my head that it's proactive versus reactive winemaking. And so I do everything to try to be proactive, whereas when you're larger production and you need to use additives and this and that, it's because you're reacting to something that's already happened in the wine. And so what that means is we taste a lot. And so when I go out to the vineyard, I'm tasting at least twice a week leading up to picking before I decide to pick. And then usually that week we pick, I'm out there 3 or 4 times every other day. And then once the wines come in, once we process them, and again, like we sort meticulously slow because being proactive, I want to take as much damage as possible out. And in this particular vineyard, we get a lot of bee damage. And so that's a really big challenge and a really meticulous, tedious process.
Does that look like basically just like the skin
Hollowed
is gone,
out,
they're
yeah.
hollowed, and then there's just like pips hanging off the
just
internal
sucked
stem,
the
like
fruit.
the little
And it
cheese
smells
inside?
like vinegar. So you're like, this is gonna put vinegar in the wine.
Right.
So it's important to take the time to remove it. And I'm sure every intern that's ever worked with me is ready to strangle me. And it's always the last one. So it's like, okay, well, here we go, you guys. We're going to be here for a long time.
Congratulations on a great harvest. We just have one special bonus round for you. You're going to be covered in sticky, black, inky fruit all day.
For 12 hours.
And guess what? There are bees.
They're not all gone.
Totally.
Yeah.
But once it's in tank, I taste every day, twice a day, because it is truly alive. And and it truly does change morning and night. And so we do not follow a recipe with cap management versus pump overs versus punch downs versus nothing at all. We always take the time to taste and make a decision. But inevitably with the Syrah, because we have reduction pretty much from day one, it's a lot of really long pump overs every single day. And usually I'm like, oh, maybe we should throw one punch down in there, maybe just a little instruction.
Yeah. Right.
But a lot of pump overs. And then once it's in barrel, again, kind of backing off a little bit, but still tasting once a month to really look at them. And again, that proactive. And what does that mean if you're not adding things to the wines? It means I do add sulfur, but the minimal amount. And part of that is adding it when it becomes necessary instead of waiting to add it as a reaction. So if I taste a barrel and it seems a little funky, I'll add the tiniest bit of sulfur. Or on the converse with these guys, they start to get matchsticky. It's the only wine where I will rack it before bottling.
Stick a big hose in and just blow through it and just blow bubbles in the wine
a lot of
to free up the sulfur.
We stir a few times and then I'm like, dang, that didn't work. And then
you'll use your same a stirring rod just like you would if you were kicking up leaves.
Exactly. And try to see if that'll handle reduction. Yeah. And then I actually just this week had my lovely assistant winemaker give the royal treatment to one of the barrels, and I think it needed a solid 2 hours.
Will you? I know there's lots of strategy. Will you rack off your lees, or will you do multiple racks, or do you try and leave it with the lees as long as you can if it's not getting too reductive?
Yeah. So I love to keep the wines untouched pretty much until we bottle them. So if I can get away with it, we only rack the week leading up to bottling. And we will stir some of them, sometimes to incorporate leaves for tannin management and sometimes for reduction reasons. And then the whites get racked twice. So for clarity, because they're unfined and unfiltered. And I do want them to be pretty clear.
Everyone has to have the Gruner Veltliner, which was, I think one of we had it in the wine club, I think, early on, probably one of the first 4 wine clubs, I think, back in 2017. So, yeah. So continues to be excellent.
So, and Gruner Bubbles right around the corner.
Let's go, dude.
Super pumped.
I'm loving this aromatic white bubble moment we're in right now.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Let's get bubbly Gruner. Let's get bubbly Albarino. I'm so stoked you're doing that.
Totally. So but I try to just rack even just the whites twice. So we do it once a month before and then once the week before. And I also always try to rack in conjunction with the moon. So I look at the apogee, which is when the moon has the least gravitational pull and is the furthest from the earth. And in my opinion and my experience over the last 10 years, I get just that much clearer of a wine.
No kidding.
From the lees settling just that much.
You
more.
are like an ancient Catholic monk in a remote part of Italy.
I'm like, you guys, we have to schedule bottling so it all makes sense here.
Yeah,
seriously, it's a good practice.
Did that practice inform you the name of your label? Or are they unrelated?
It did not. It did not. So my brand was originally called Moon Unit Wines in 2014 because that's
there are some old Instagram posts about Moon Unit Wines. Yes, I was forgetting that. I was like, what is this Moon Unit Wines?
Yeah. So
and then Frank Zappa's daughter came in, right?
Well, exactly. Yeah, my dad called me Moon Unit, and that was really where it came from. And then I learned about Frank Zappa's daughter through the label process, but her trademark was for music and merchandise, and I was going for wine. So I decided to go for it. And then after selling out of that first vintage, we had the next vintage in bottle, but no labels printed, luckily. I got a cease and desist followed by maybe we should do business together.
Oh, man.
And I was like, I don't think you understand. I'm making 24 cases of pretty nerdy wine. So I don't know.
Oh, my God. Hey, technical support. Yeah. We've got an overheat warning on the iPad and it stopped recording.
Oh, okay.
Joseph. Support. Says there's a nearby personal hotspot to connect to also. It's having a whole freak out fit.
Oh, wait, does that affect our audio?
I don't know.
No, it doesn't.
Is it doing anything?
Oh, we're good.
See how it says the camera
It caught us in a fun moment there.
It did.
Yeah.
Everyone's like mouth agape, dying, thinking about moon unit being threatened by your 24 cases.
Yeah.
That is crazy though. So what is Moon Unit a band?
It's
her name?
it's a woman from the 80s. She
Her
had
name?
one. Yeah.
You gotta-
She had
I'm not-
one song.
I need more
Valley
pop
Girl
culture.
from
Valley
the 80s.
Girl.
That
Yeah.
was her big song.
Her dad, Frank Zappa, is a famous
I know
like
Frank.
avant-garde
Yeah, of
jazz
course.
guy.
Yeah.
But is her name actually Moon Unit?
Oh, yeah.
It is. They all have very bizarre.
Her brother is Dweezil.
Yeah.
Dweezil?
Oh yeah,
That's cool. Is it D apostrophe Weasel?
no,
'Cause that'd be really
that would have been better. DWEEZIL.
Yeah. But anyways,
Yeah.
after that, I decided to go back to the drawing board. My cousin and I had created the image of the moon with the flower of life fading into dust, which is still incorporated into the image today. And I really wanted to keep that, but take the time to pick something that I felt was more reflective of my style, which I see as a balance of feminine and masculine energies. And so the moon, Luna, is the more feminine side, higher acid, lower alcohol wines, when Santa Barbara allows it. And
Yikes.
Heart is the stag's antlers, and that is the masculine side. And you know that all of the stem inclusion and interesting little things that I do to add that little masculine touch with all the whites. They all have skin contact, varying degrees of skin contact.
Love that.
And also compared to a lot of other people that make wines in a similar style, I like to do a little bit of longer maceration on the skins. So all of the fermentations end up being about 3 weeks. And I really like that tannin development and the complexity that comes from that final week once the wine's dry.
I feel like your wines always have this kind of like you were talking about with the dried stems, but they have this more like intentional, more set tannin structure that feels like it feels both like really integrated into the wine, but it feels very much like it's framing it in this way
present.
that is and it doesn't matter if it what wine, white or red, that you have, like everything kind of has this texture that like feels really intentional and really puts like a point on the wine.
Yeah,
And,
definitely.
there's a presence that's like very, very clear in them.
Yeah. Again, we can tell you love making it.
Yeah. And I love to cook, and so it's also important to me. Like I think that all my wines tend to be very expressive aromatically, and again the texture as well. That they're delicious on their own, but also really diversely food friendly is important to me. I really want them. I don't want you to feel like you need to decide which Luna Hart or Piazza wine goes with your dinner. They should all go with your dinner.
Yeah.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
That's the most like kind of clear thing about the wines is they're like super flexible. Like,
Yeah.
they're great to drink on their own because they have all these layers and there's like they're very interesting, but they're also like clearly food wines. They have the acidity, they have like this levity and refreshment to them, but they're also like super food flavors.
yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I know we're talking to Syrah, but going back to the Gruner for a moment, I want to say that was by the glass, every 2 weeks during my tenure at Satellite. I think it was there when I started, which was a trip because I remember you came in one night and I was like, oh my God.
I'd like to make it on by the glass
And
every 2 weeks,
not
we
only,
should.
it's sold by itself based on its characteristics, but being at Satellite, it was the easiest wine to pair with so many,
veggie foods.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally.
So like, thank you for making my job easier in addition to producing an amazing wine.
Yeah.
One of the main ingredients in the yoga pants salad dressing is white pepper. So
And
it really is a Gruner salad.
Totally.
Yeah.
And herbs, like all of those flavors. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Core to the experience. What are you gonna cook? What are we gonna have these bottles with?
When are we having filet mignon? Yeah, when are we having filet mignon with your folks?
Filet mignon. My other favorite go-to, well, of course, blue cheese. Saint-Agur with either of these wines is a match made in heaven.
What is that? It does feel like blue cheese is like specifically the thing for Syrah. And
Syrah, and it doesn't matter the style.
Yeah.
Like whether it's a lighter style or a rich style, blue cheese is gonna hit the spot. I think
it's a
it
textural
feels
thing,
like
right?
the key to my mouth right now is a hunk of blue cheese. Then I'll have all of the flavors that I'm looking for.
Can fact check Brett get blue cheese?
Hey, laptop boy, you got any blue cheese in the fridge?
Blue cheese stuffed olives.
There we go.
That'll help.
Dirty martinis.
No, that's interesting.
Yeah.
The other thing I've really wanted to play around with this wine, and I think this would also be really wonderful with it, is like a seared duck breast with blackberry peppery sauce to go with it.
Like nice, like the duck breast has that like wonderful kind of like irony sort of note to it.
Totally.
That stands out.
Totally.
It really goes with it. Yeah.
Or we're still in Chanterelle season in Santa Barbara.
Oh, they're going crazy.
I literally go to the farmer's market every Tuesday and every Saturday to buy Chanterelles. My pocketbook is empty, but I don't care.
Did you score big tonight?
Oh, yeah.
Tonight is Tuesday.
Oh, yeah. And the Tutti Frutti guy, Ryan, now knows me personally.
Excellent.
Because of
That's
the
a dangerous
Chanterelles.
connection. We'll be buying tomatoes and chanterelles like crazy.
Well, and when I did that dinner back east, I took chanterelles in my suitcase to make a chanterelle Gruyere tart with Chardonnay.
That's how to
was
become the most popular winemaker.
pretty awesome.
Oh yeah.
Everyone's like, "You're putting mushrooms in your suitcase? Isn't that sketchy?" I'm like, "I don't know. I'm gonna do it."
I don't know. Somebody stop me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What are they going to do? Come after you for your delicious rare mushrooms?
Yeah.
That's a crime.
So that wife's been carrying Luna Hart for a while. Like, how did you guys find each other?
You were one of the first like direct winemaker tastings I had when we first opened, right?
I don't remember exactly how we met, but we met very early on.
I wonder who introduced us.
And
You may have just
Ryan.
come in.
It was Ryan.
Was it Ryan Rourke? You were working with him.
It was
then.
Ryan.
Yeah.
I was working with him,
And
it
I
was,
had done a harvest with him and Sam, who was working with him at Burning Creek Vineyard.
Yeah.
And were you working in the cellar then, or
I
had
was
you?
working in Burning Creek on and off.
Okay.
And Ryan Roark is how this all started for me. He is the guy that is paying it forward
Your
every step of the way.
Texan winemaking wine connection.
Yes. But I'm not the only one that can attribute their career to Ryan, and that's a beautiful thing. And I try to give that to everybody that I work with as well. But yeah, it was actually right when I was about to re-release, you were like the first person to buy my wines.
That's right. Okay, because you were
And
like, this is my new brand, Luna Hart.
Exactly.
And this is my delicious Gruner Veltliner.
Yeah.
I'm like, ooh, I'll have that.
Yeah.
I will have a lot
Totally.
of that. Excellent. Yeah, I remember.
how
I
it
do
all
remember
began.
meeting you like very fondly and very clearly, which is difficult to say for most things that happened in 2017. Like, I don't really remember a lot of opening the restaurant.
That was
like flashes of color.
Pun
and light and
intended. That was
sound.
quite liftoff for the restaurant.
Totally.
It was a heavy time of my life. Yeah, it's So thank you for bringing me really good things. there.
Yeah.
What do you think? What are we thinking in terms of like these wines in conversation? I'm so interested to like, I don't know, break down
What
the
do you mean?
flavors. Like, I think just like as a general like review of these things, yours is so inviting and open, and like has what I would consider like really classic like Syrah notes, like blue and black fruits and like that.
Mulberry always sticks out to me.
Mulberry stands out a lot.
That's such a Ballard Canyon thing. That in particular. for
Herby
me always.
little like
Garrigue.
garrigue berry for sure.
But I would have to say, like, this has a little bit more of like that gamey, meaty French, what I think of as a French nose.
Yeah.
But it's got this intensity to the fruit that I think it has this more richness and intensity to the fruit to it.
I think too, it's got a lot to drop out.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like there's a lot in suspension in the wine still.
Yeah.
But that also actually might be more the terracotta before aging. So.
Yeah, and that finish. I mean, I love the terracotta finish, and the finish, the tannin structure is the tip of your tongue, which you expect from the terracotta.
Yeah, right.
I think that's a fun, super fun. If you ever want to delve into nerdiness of tannin, I need
You're
to
with the right people to do so.
Yes,
I
we
need
do.
to find, like, there was this chart I saw in Postmodern Winemaking, which is such a great inspirational book. I did not agree with everything, but it was eye-opening for me. And he has this drawing of where different tannin sources affect your mouth. And
cool.
it truly is true. Where you feel tannin presence in your mouth is a clue for where the tannin comes from.
Really?
Yeah. And over time, with aging, the tannin chains polymerize, get longer, and eventually they're towards the back of your tongue as these long, smooth, silky tannins.
Right. That's so cool because this wine, which I just had in my glass, is like so the front rim of my palate, whereas your wine is not that. It's got like a totally different profile. And that is why I love. Oh, here. Would you like yours or
we have the French one.
Sorry, I brought exactly the wrong number. I brought a
At least it's an even number.
I figured
it's an even number.
Here's my thought though. My rationale was Sean and I will have one glass, and then you get to be in charge of one and the other, so you get to comparatively taste your wines, and Sean and I will fill our single glasses with one or the other. It was a glass for laptop boy. And I texted Joe. He's like, we don't have glasses. I was like, well, we don't have stems. And I was like, well, I want stems for the thing. So anyways, but yeah, it is so interesting to taste like.
Yeah. And the Luna Hart is a lot more of the sides of your mouth and the back of your palate. And they are opposite of each other.
It is like together, these wines would fill your whole palate with tannin. It's like, it is amazing. You have no like focus like it mentally it's there if you like move
really
your tongue around
for it,
but the feeling
the
emotional attachment is to like more like back of the palate, side of the palate. How cool.
Yours has this interesting thing too where we talked about the fruit quality to it, but I've noticed this among some Ballard Canyon Santa Rita Hills Syrahs that I know I should ask first. This was all neutral oak. So again, figured these Syrahs that I know are neutral oak, and yet they have this kind of warmth that feels not maybe baking spice, but in some kind of layer of like a glaze.
Sweet tobacco, just a hint of it where you're like, was that oak or?
And it's a nice kind of, I just kind of attribute it to that sunshine, that moderate climate that allows all these elements to fit together at once.
Totally.
So great.
It's like a chocolate or a cocoa plus tobacco kind of feel.
Yeah, definitely.
It totally tricks the mind. It's like, oh, that's like wood inspired, wood influenced.
Exactly.
It feels really something else entirely.
And to me, it would like smack me in the face after coming back from the French Syrah too. Like I kind of got a whisper of it before, but then it really came through.
It's so interesting tasting these like same grapes side by side, but really different, obviously different harvest ripeness. 100%. But in such a like there is a closeness and there's a super distance between the two.
Well. So I definitely dream of playing around with amphora or concrete with this wine down the line.
For sure. It's Syrah, I think, can really benefit from like a little bit of that like earthen vessel.
And I think with the property being minerality driven, sand, not limestone, but still I think it would kind of lift it up a little bit. We just got a concrete open top tank, so for fermentation only.
Nice.
Awesome.
There we go.
And everyone keeps asking what I'm gonna use it for, and it'll kind of harvest will dictate what it gets used for, but this is always the last thing to come in, so
it's free reign.
It can pretty much choose what it wants to do.
That's nice.
Cool. That's nice. Really cool.
Well, and talking more about comparing Syrahs and styles, and these are obviously quite different as we've mentioned, although they have some through lines. But with your Luna Hart Syrahs and Piazza Syrahs, again, you mentioned the vineyards were planted just 2 years apart, same clone, different soils. What are the distinguishing characteristics between those two Syrahs?
Yeah, so with
generally?
Piazza, we actually make two different ones. I make the estate Syrah and the reserve Syrah. And my vision for it depends a little bit on vintage and where it exactly ends up lying. But my envision is for the estate Syrah to be more Estrella heavy, so more of this clone. And on that property, the Estrella is like black fruit. Like this has that mulberry red brightness to it.
Right.
And it is like...
That's on the color too. It's not as blue colored.
Totally,
in the glass.
yes.
It's purpley.
So the Syrah on the limestone is like black and blue fruits and so much limestone punch, and a really interesting herbaceousness. In general, Syrah and young Syrah has this note to me that early on in my career I called breathy, and my boss, she knew what I was talking about, and she hated that. Hated that. And then
You should just call it breathy of someone you love.
I'm like,
loving
Someone you want to make out with.
Yeah, exactly.
That kind of breath.
That's the breath I want to taste. But then I also realized that it reminds me of wax lips. And as a kid from the 90s, there's this character in Wax Lips that is like the strawberry and the wax. And it is that wax, that like breathy quality to Syrah.
Yeah.
And the Syrah and Piazza especially showcases that. Now I maybe call it like lavender sage, but I still wax lips in my head.
Yeah, it's wax lips. And it's like that good mystery waxy, not candy.
Totally.
Stop eating it.
Stop eating it.
Stop eating it. Drew, stop eating it.
Chew on it until you have to
Echoing
spit
in
it
my
out.
mind. Exactly. Yes. Wax lips.
But we also have Alban clone, and so that's so red fruit driven, and so I use a lot of, and that I use the dried stems in, and so the Alban goes predominantly into the reserve Syrah with a little bit of new oak, but really to have that complexity of both the clones, the dried stems, the whole cluster, the destemmed all together. It was funny because originally why we made two different Syrahs was because I had bonus fruit in my first vintage at Piazza in 2019. And I decided, and I decided to do 40% whole cluster and just be like, let's just do it. I had always been apprehensive to go heavy on whole cluster with Syrah because it was what I was taught.
Yep.
And it's taken me a long time to take baby steps towards, as I said, making the wines I want to make.
You're taking steps up the Rhône Valley.
Yeah, exactly.
Just moving towards the extreme north.
Climbing the steep hillsides.
Up to the north.
Totally. And I loved that wine, and we decided to bottle it as its own thing. But in all of my notes, I had written QR, quick release Syrah. That was always my vision for it.
Really?
And it needed at least a year in bottle.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like that, your more whole cluster, like to really get in, like, of course, like maybe you'll get like primaries first, and it'll feel very light and bright and like whatever. But the most interesting thing is like whole cluster of long age.
Totally.
Is really where you get into all of the like the most remarkable corners of a wine.
Yeah.
So, watch those tannins develop.
Yeah.
Totally.
So and then that definitely was one of my favorite wines ever. So 2019 Piazza Estate Syrah. If you ever see it,
buy it.
When we re-release it, taste it.
I feel like I've said that about a number of the wines that you've touched tonight. If you see it, just buy it. Take it. It's yours.
Seriously.
It will last. It will improve with age.
That was the fun thing. That was a lot of us winemakers, me in particular, I fight the score thing.
Mm-hmm.
Owners want to see it. It is an important marketing piece for a lot of people. We do it. Wine enthusiasts, of course, Matt knows me and knows the wines. And so, but it was, I think, one of the first years, or I feel like it's a fairly new thing, that they had introduced Cellar Select, which is an extra little mark of wines that they deem that are extremely age-worthy.
Yeah.
And he gave it to that wine, and I was like, that's pretty awesome. Because I always tell people when they're curious about aging wines to buy a case of something you love and experiment with it. And I never drink my own Kool-Aid. So well, now, Gretchen, you've been told by Matt Ketman to drink the Kool-Aid on this one.
Yeah, you're probably better about it than me. Both of you. Like, I'm like a cellarless wine shop owner. I'm like, well, I got all this new wine coming. Why would I save any? I just want to share it with everybody and get it out, and they can if they can sit on it if they want. But there's certain wines like I really like desire to see like really your whole lineup, like even some of the rosés you make are really
the
really
2019
super
I just came across
amazing.
2 cases of the 2019 as we were shifting some things around the house, and I was like, dang, Gretchen, you really dropped the ball on this one. And it's amazing. We took a case of it to the wedding. I was like, this is the wedding rosé. This is what I want to drink. And it was cool to see.
Which you can't say about most rosés. No. You know, come a year or two, 2 years.
Yeah,
I'm
done.
ready to go on. Yeah.
Totally. So it's fun to see.
So cool.
Drew, why don't you tell us why you wanted to have Gretchen in your wine club?
I want to have Gretchen in my wine club because she's my nice friend and she makes nice wines. Next question. No, Gretchen is so. As a legitimate podcast note, Gretchen is a inspiration and somebody who totally fits the satellite ethos, and also has been like really, I feel like our like professional careers, like you really, like you were saying, like Luna Hart kind of came to be right around when we were figuring out what the heck we were. So
yeah, totally.
Yeah,
we've grown together, so it makes sense to be here together tonight.
What grows together goes together.
Our vintage ourselves. And so, and I just like it's so it's stereotypical. Like, you know, Satellite is like always trying to highlight small independent producers in Santa Barbara, and like you're the definition of that. And you're doing an amazing job, both like for your own personal brand and by influencing the winery that you know that pays the bills.
Yeah,
and Piazza is a great winery.
Yeah, and it's been such a dream to truly get to have the creative freedom to build something for somebody else, but still have it be 100% my own. And they're nice complements to each other. The ethos is the same across the board. All the wines are unfined and unfiltered, minimal intervention, but really getting to hone into the more estate side of Piazza with everything coming from our 2 vineyards, versus trying to find somebody to grow me organic and biodynamic and sustainable Cab Franc. Dang you!
Yeah. Please. Is it just Coquelicot? Is it only is that the only Cab Franc we've access to?
Wow.
Probably true.
Well,
there's a few. I work with a few great little vineyards, so you know, but they're so small that I'm like, okay, I've taken all of your Cab Franc, and now I've taken all of your Cab Franc, and now I have to get Coquelicot Cab Franc.
It's true.
Well, and going back to the evolution too, just so this is said, just for context, you have been at Luna Hart for 9 years now, right?
Yeah.
And now just celebrate your 4th vintage with Piazza. So I mean,
Luna Hart started with 24 cases, and this year I made 800 cases.
Let's go.
That is.
Let's go.
I'm
awesome.
Pumped. I'm so pumped.
That
I'm also
is
terrified. But this wine was actually the first wine that I embraced big growth, and it was a huge undertaking for me and a huge risk. And it was the first year that Luna Hart had profit to actually spend in the business.
There we go.
I've heard about what did you say? What's that word?
Yeah, I don't.
It doesn't actually
Weird.
exist. It's an illusion. It's an illusion.
How amazing.
And yeah, so I made 200 cases of this wine, and we are just now officially releasing it, and I think we're already have sold through 40 cases, so that's pretty awesome.
No surprise here.
So I'm like
Good for you.
super excited with all the growth that's coming.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So good. It's a joy. It really is. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for
rad.
sitting with us during this initial test run of the podcast. Look at our
This
Look at our
gorgeous little
producer.
space.